By March 1940, Britain was facing a math problem that could decide whether its people would live or go hungry. German Admiral Karl Donitz's U-boat were sending 300,000 tons of merchant ships to the bottom of the Atlantic every month. The Royal Navy only had about 200 escort ships to guard thousands of miles of sea routes used by supply convoys. Winston Churchill had just been made First Lord of the Admiralty. That spring, he wrote an urgent note. Britain needed more ships. Not later, not next year, but right away. The usual answer was already sitting in the nation's shipyards. The destroyer. These sleek, fast warships showed the best of British engineering. They carried 4.7-inch guns, torpedoes, and were quick enough to chase any submarine seen on the surface. They were powerful and beautiful machines, but they were far too costly. Each destroyer cost about $900,000 back then, equal to roughly $45 million today. They also needed 18 months of skilled labor to build just one. Even if every shipyard worked at full speed, Britain could only produce about 30 each year. While merchant ships were being sunk daily, the Navy needed an entirely new kind of answer. In May 1940, France was collapsing, and the submarine threat kept growing. That was when naval designer William Reed offered an idea that senior officers first laughed at. His ship design wasn't even meant for war. Reed had spent years creating a sturdy whaling ship called the Southern Pride class. Simple working vessels that chased whales through freezing Antarctic storms. These ships were built from common materials, regular steel, easy-to-find parts, and methods every coastal shipyard already knew. They weren't fast or comfortable, and no one would call them pretty. But they were cheap, about $90,000 each, and could be built in 8 months. That made a huge difference. For the price of one destroyer, Britain could make 10 of these smaller ships. In the same time it took to build 3 destroyers, they could launch 20 of Reed's new corvettes. The problem changed from building the perfect submarine hunter to building enough ships to fill the ocean. So submarines couldn't hide. Commander George Cray, head of anti-submarine warfare, quickly saw what this meant. The Royal Navy didn't need a few large, perfect ships. It needed numbers, lots of smaller escorts to guard every convoy, forming overlapping protective screens that denied submarines safe attack zones. Destroyers were like precise surgical tools, but the Atlantic called for something blunt and massive. On July 25, 1940, while the Battle of Britain raged in the skies, the Admiralty ordered 58 of these new corvettes called the Flower class. Each would be named after a flower. Gladiolus, Bluebell, Compan, an intentional reminder that they were simple, humble ships. The order sparked loud arguments. Traditional naval officers claimed Britain was giving up quality for quantity. These ships could only reach 16 knots, half the speed of a destroyer. They carried one 4-inch gun instead of 4. Their anti-submarine weapons were just depth charges rolled off the back, not fancy launchers that could fire ahead. But none of that mattered when the alternative was no escort at all. By September 1940, monthly shipping losses had risen to 450,000 tons. The first corvette, HMS Gladiolus, finished her testing and sailed to the western approaches to begin escort duty. She didn't look like a warship at all. Yet, she was about to help save Britain. Admiral Dunit had been improving his tactics since 1936 when he first took command of Germany's rebuilt submarine fleet. Old-style submarine warfare relied on each boat acting alone. Sneak in, strike, then disappear. Dunit saw that this wasted their best strength, stealth. So he created a new plan known as Wolfpack tactics. In a Wolfpack, one submarine followed a convoy from a distance and radioed its location. Then several others closed in. When 6 or 8 submarines surrounded the convoy, they attacked together from many directions. The escorts couldn't chase them all at once, and confusion helped the Germans win. The math was terrible for the British. One destroyer could handle one submarine, maybe 2. But if 6 attacked from 6 sides, the escort spent all its time racing around while merchant ships burned. On the night of October 18, 1940, Convoy SC-7 learned this lesson the hard way. 43 merchant ships left Sydney, Nova Scotia, protected by just 2 escorts. 5 U-boats found them south of Iceland. By sunrise, 21 ships had been sunk. The worst single convoy disaster of the war. The escorts had no chance. They simply couldn't be everywhere at once. Churchill understood this perfectly. In his first big speech as Prime Minister on March 19, 1940, he used the phrase Battle of the Atlantic. He said it was the one campaign that truly scared him. Britain imported 55 million tons of supplies every year: food, oil, ammunition, and raw materials. If those shipments stopped, the army couldn't fight and people would soon starve. To guard those supplies, Britain needed hundreds of escort ships it didn't yet have. The Royal Navy counted 200 escorts in September 1939. Dunitz already had 57 U-boat and was adding 30 more each month. The odds favored the Germans. The new corvette plan didn't beat the U-boat by being better. It won by being everywhere. Wolfpack tactics depended on the escorts being too few and too slow to respond. But if each convoy had 8, 10, or 12 escorts instead of 2, the math flipped. In September 1941, one U-boat pack tried to attack Convoy 127. They met HMS Gladiolus, Bluebell, Campula, Nostium, and 4 more corvettes forming a protective circle. Whenever submarines tried to surface and coordinate, corvettes surrounded them, forcing them underwater where they moved slower and couldn't communicate. The wolf pack scattered. This marked a major change in how the Navy thought. For centuries, Britain had focused on building a few powerful ships that could outclass enemy vessels in one-on-one battles. The corvette approach did the opposite. Build many good enough ships and win through numbers. It wasn't glamorous. Felt more like factory work than naval pride. Many senior officers hated it. Admiral Dudley Pound even said early corvettes were barely fit for their job. He was right in one way. Each ship alone was weak, but together they became unstoppable. From October 1940 to March 1941, 30 corvettes joined the fleet. At first, shipping losses still rose. U-boat were sinking ships faster than Britain could replace them. German crews even called this their happy time. But the trend was slowly shifting. Each new corvette narrowed the gap. By May 1941, 89 corvettes were patrolling the Atlantic. Convoys now had 3 times more escorts than before. Submarines still struck, but coordinating attacks was getting harder every month. Dunitz hunters were discovering that their prey now traveled with its own pack. The corvettes were slower and less elegant, but there were enough of them to change the game. The once helpless merchant ships finally had teeth. Blueprints from Smith's Dock Company, dated August 1940, showed that each corvette was 205 feet long with a 33-foot beam. The dimensions came almost straight from Reed's Southern Pride whaling ship design. He hadn't drawn a warship at all. He had taken a working commercial hull, removed the whale processing machinery, and added weapons and Navy equipment. The Admiralty purposely kept the design simple. The ships used old-fashioned steam engines instead of modern turbines, riveted seams instead of welded ones, and a single propeller. Every design choice was made so any shipyard in Britain could build them using the tools and workers they already had. This changed everything. Destroyers could only be built in a handful of specialized shipyards equipped with large slips, precision tools, and highly trained engineers. Only 7 yards in all of Britain could handle that work.
Corvettes needed none of it. Smith's Dock in Middlesbrough, Hall Russell in Aberdeen, and Harland and Wolff in Belfast all took orders. Even small coastal yards that normally built fishing or freight boats could now help. The Flower-class design used regular 3/8 and merchant-grade steel plates, standard rivets, and parts already mass-produced for civilian ships. Reed later said he made the plans deliberately simple so that even a yard-building truers could switch to corvettes within weeks. The engine choice showed this perfectly. Destroyers used advanced Parsons turbines producing 40,000 horsepower. Powerful but complex machines that took 9 months to make. Corvettes used old-style triple-expansion steam engines generating 2,750 horsepower. These engines were based on technology from the 1800s, similar to those in trains and tugboats. Britain already built hundreds of them for commercial ships and factories. When corvette production increased in 1941, engine suppliers even included companies that usually made mining hoists or steam pumps for factories. The engines were heavy, noisy, and shook the ship badly, but they were available right away. Shipbuilding moved quickly because of these choices. At John Crown and Sons in Sunderland, holes took shape in open-air areas using the same methods workers had used since Victorian times. Teams of 4 riveters worked together. One heated the rivet red-hot, 2 pushed it through the holes, and the last one hammered it flat with a pneumatic tool. It was loud, slow, and hard work, but everyone already knew the process. On November 12, 1940, they laid the keel for HMS Campanula. By June 3, 1941, less than 7 months later, she finished testing and joined the fleet at Western Approaches Command. Now, compare that to the destroyer HMS Jervis, started in August 1937 at Hawthorne-Leslie. Her turbines came from 3 different factories. Her electrical and fire control systems had to meet exact naval standards down to thousandth of an inch. She was completed in May 1939 after 21 months and required 300,000 hours of expert labor. Jervis was without question the better ship in every way, but she was only one. In those 21 months, British shipyards built 47 corvettes using the same total labor hours, spread among less skilled workers. Smith's dock alone launched 42 Flower-class ships at its fastest, producing one every 17 days. The workforce came from ordinary backgrounds. Riveters from commercial shipbuilding, welders from scrapyards, and mechanics trained on locomotives. None had special naval certificates. None needed them. The Admiralty had traded perfection for numbers, gambling that more ships, even imperfect ones, could win the war. By December 1941, 151 corvettes were in active service. The gap in Atlantic escorts was closing not because of advanced technology, but because simple designs allowed mass production. The destroyer HMS Electra, which entered service in February 1939, showed everything the Royal Navy believed about modern sea warfare. Her turbine engines pushed her to 36 knots, fast enough to catch any surface submarine and still escape enemy aircraft. She carried 8 4.7-inch guns for surface battles and 5 torpedo launchers that could attack even the biggest enemy ships. Her sonar could find submarines 1,500 yards away, and her Hedgehog mortars could fire explosives forward without losing sonar contact. She cost $922,000 to build and took 18 months of the best workers at the Hawthorne-Leslie yard to complete. Electra was a masterpiece. She could handle almost any combat situation at sea. But on February 27, 1942, Japanese destroyers sank her during the Battle of the Java Sea. In about 7 minutes, Britain lost $922,000 and a year and a half of valuable labor. This was not a rare event. HMS Glowworm, HMS Hardy, and HMS Hostile, all powerful destroyers worth nearly $3 million together, were gone by June 1940. When the war began, Britain had 84 destroyers. By December 1940, 35 of them were sunk or too damaged to use again.
Each one lost meant more than a ship. It meant months of work, money, and training that could never be replaced quickly. Corvettes changed that calculation completely. HMS Gladiolus, for example, cost only $90,000, just 1/10 of a destroyer's price. When U-568 sank her on October 16, 1941, Britain lost a ship, yes, but not an irreplaceable one. 7 weeks later, Smith's dock launched another corvette, HMS Heliotrope, to take her place. The whole process from loss to replacement took less time than building a single destroyer. This ability to replace losses fast made a huge difference. The Battle of the Atlantic was a long, grinding fight where ships were constantly destroyed. Britain could afford to lose corvettes and keep replacing them. Destroyers were too expensive and slow to rebuild. From 1940 to 1945, 47 corvettes were lost in battle. Replacing all of them cost about $4.2 million total. Losing 47 destroyers would have cost $43 million and kept British shipyards busy for 3 straight years just to replace them. Time was even more important than money. In September 1940, when Britain was losing 450,000 tons of shipping a month, it needed escort ships immediately, not perfect ships later. For example, the destroyer HMS Opportune started construction in July 1940, but didn't join the fleet until August 1942, 25 months later. During that same time, British shipyards had finished 127 corvettes. Every one of them could escort convoys and hunt submarines while Opportune was still unfinished. Opportune was far stronger than any corvette. But she wasn't ready when Britain needed her most. This was the problem military planners faced. They could use their materials to make one excellent destroyer or 10 good enough corvettes. Which would help more? The Atlantic gave the answer. 10 simple ships were worth far more than one perfect one. Convoy defense wasn't about winning single battles. It was about stopping submarines from finding chances to attack at all. A destroyer could rush to a danger zone at 36 knots and fight brilliantly, but 3 other parts of the convoy would remain unguarded. 10 corvettes, even at 16 knots, could spread out and form overlapping protection circles that denied submarines any opening. Admiral Percy Noble, who commanded Western approaches, explained this clearly in December 1941. His fleet needed at least 300 escort vessels to protect Atlantic routes properly. If Britain relied on destroyers, reaching that number would take 8 years. With corvettes, it would take only 18 months. And Britain was already close to that goal. Destroyers were still faster, stronger, and better armed in every way. But that no longer mattered. A perfect ship arriving late was useless. Wars are won by ships that are good enough and available when needed. The corvette was exactly that. Good enough, cheap enough, and ready right away. Aboard HMS Gladiolus in November 1940, sailor Ronald Rundle discovered why these ships were nicknamed halfway to hell. The corvette rolled from side to side at terrifying angles. 40 degrees one way, pausing, then 40 degrees the other way every 8 seconds. And this wasn't a storm. It was a normal Tuesday morning with moderate waves. 2/3 of the crew spent that watch throwing up into buckets or helmets. The rest were too weak to eat. The reason was simple. Corvettes were based on short, wide, whaling ship hulls meant to survive heavy seas. That shape kept them from sinking, but made them roll constantly in even mild weather. Destroyers were longer and slimmer, slicing through waves smoothly. Corvettes were shorter and rounder, so they bobbed like corks, twisting and rocking in all directions.